Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman, and today I'm joined by Erik Brewer. Erik Brewer's company flips or wholesales over 400 houses every year. Today, he shares with me some of the lessons that he's learned over that process through implementing different exit strategies and developing as a leader to help his company grow. Welcome to the podcast, Erik. How you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you?
Hey, fantastic. Excited to talk with you again. I can tell you you're one person that every time we talk, I learn something. And I appreciate that a ton. So I'm excited for you to be on this podcast, mostly selfishly, mostly just because I want to learn a few things from you.
Cool. Well, do my best not to let you down.
We'll see how we do. So for people listening to this podcast that might not know you, might not know who you are, your background, or anything like that, could you share just a little bit about who are you, what have you done, like the history of how you've gotten to where you are today, and then what are you doing now?
Yeah, sure. So I am in York, Pennsylvania. It's a relatively small rural area, about 45 minutes north of Baltimore, Maryland, and about 30 minutes south of the capital of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg, and then about 3.5 hours east of Pittsburgh and an hour and a half east of Philadelphia. So if you sort of triangulate that stuff, I am in the southern east portion of PA, closer to Baltimore than really any other notable area. I am a real estate investor, been doing it since 2006. Currently have roughly 40 plus employees. We operate in 3 markets within 2 hours of our home office here. We did just north of 400 real estate deals last year. I got my start really in business in the automobile industry. Went out of high school, went into the Army, got out of the Army, got into the car business, spent 8 years in the car business, really learned how to sell there, learned how to manage, learned a little bit of marketing, got burned out. The car business back in, this would have been the late 90s, early 2000s, was very demanding from a schedule perspective. And it's never been known as like the most enjoyable atmosphere to either sell or buy in, right? I think most people that sell cars don't love the experience. And I don't know, Consumer Reports said a couple years that like 98% of people that bought a car didn't love the experience as well. So I was, that was catching up to me. The hours was weighing on me, and I was about to have my first child. So in 2005, I left the car business, did some soul searching, decided to get into real estate, started my real estate career in finance, was basically cold calling refinance leads at a mortgage company. And after doing that for about 6 months, my previous mentor from the car business got into real estate, knew that I had made the transition out of the car business, and called me. And a couple days later, we partnered up. And in February of 2006, we started flipping houses. So a little bit of my background, how I got into real estate. And then I think what you'd ask is, what does that look like now? Our business today is mostly wholesale, novation, and we'll do about 75 fix and flips. About a year ago, I started a commercial real estate investment group. We have about $200 million in commercial, multifamily, office, and industrial projects currently in our pipeline, actively raising $50 million in private equity to fund those projects. That'll include acquisitions, fundraising, construction, property management, and then obviously the disposition of those properties, whether it be through refinance and retaining those assets or selling them. And we also do some group coaching and real estate training, taking basically just the systems and processes, best practices that we've used to build our company in the last 17 years, turning them into outward facing curriculums to share with other real estate investors that are looking to increase profits, reduce drama and stress, and then grow simultaneously. So hopefully that gives you a decent sort of snapshot of what we got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's more than I knew. Even I didn't know about your commercial real estate investment. I don't know, you call it company or initiative. So that's pretty fascinating. One thing I've always been super impressed by is the volume you've been able to do in a relatively small and non-populous area. Like you're always like the example in my mind of like somebody who can show like how many deals can really be done in a market, which is pretty fascinating. And then on the education side, what you mentioned, because I know that's how we know each other a lot, is we're sending people to your innovations training all the time, because I think, I mean, nobody really invents anything, but of all investors doing innovations, I'm not aware of anybody who did it before you did. Is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And
so I
you
think
know, like,
I think I innovated, not invented, the wholesale application of novations. The legal concept and application had been around for 100 years. However, until 2008 is really when I sort of stumbled on it, simply because I was looking to circumvent the FHA anti-flip laws that exist. Where now you can imagine in 2008, to give you just how pressing of an issue it was for me to figure this out. In 2008, like 99% of every borrower was using FHA financing. You might say, why? Well, it's because what fueled the economic collapse in the United States was the mismanagement of mortgage loan products and a lot of fraudulent activity and liberal lending policies. So in 2008 and 9, like the hardest thing to do in the world was to get a mortgage. Like nobody was lending money. It's why most investors went out of business, because their lines of credit dried up, not because they couldn't find good deals and renovate them and sell them for more money. They just like all of the
yeah,
capital marketplace went away. So I'm flipping homes, like buying them, renovating them in 3 to 4 weeks, putting them on the MLS and getting offers. But every borrower was using FHA financing. The problem with that is like there's a seasoning requirement. So I bought and renovated it in 3 weeks. I got to wait 12 weeks before the buyer can even write a contract. Then once you got an FHA loan on a flip house into underwriting, you were a marked man. Like they were literally trying to find reasons to decline a loan on a flip house, because as like these foreclosures and short sales and all of this was unfolding, the biggest loss that mortgage companies were experiencing on their foreclosures were flipped properties. So that information makes its way back upstream, and underwriters are given basically a directive like, hey, like if this is a flip, there's a lot of risk involved here. And if you really think about a loan underwriter, their job is to hedge against risk. So FHA was a nightmare for me back then. And I was looking for a way to circumvent it. And novations, as you start to learn more about it, really gives you the ability to sell your wholesale deal to a retail buyer without ever taking deed or being on title or funding or renovating it, which means you're not exposed to FHA seasoning, underwriting, anything that pertains to a flip. So that's where it started. And as I learned more about it, I realized there was all these other residual benefits, and I just started applying it to every aspect of my acquisitions arm of my business, and come to realize that like I was passing up 50%, roughly 40-50% of my leads generated from PPC, billboards, mail, TV were properties that were in like turnkey condition. The seller was willing to take a little bit less than retail, and my old wholesale fix and flip, buy and hold strategy of acquiring it just didn't fit for them. So I was throwing away all these really good leads. And once I started to understand novations, we started converting 10 to 15% of those leads, which that's why we do such a high volume in a small market, is because we're literally doing another 4 or 5 deals per batch of 100 leads than any other investor would do that's only trying to fit those leads into a wholesale, buy and hold, wholesale, or fix and flip model. That, and I think we do a fairly good job of just hiring good people, having good data, managing people, leading people, training, things like that. I think we do a really good job of just running a good business. And then you stack that on top of having this, sort of Swiss Army knife, exit strategy and acquisition strategy. It compounds, and we end up doing a really good volume in a small market.
yeah, no, that's pretty fascinating. So yeah, there's the brief the brief idea on novations, which I think is super cool. And it's something, if you listen to this podcast, you'll see we talked with quite a few people about those kinds of strategies. And you've been highlighted before as somebody that many people have learned this strategy from. So yeah, definitely if anybody's looking, you know, if you're just like, it drives me crazy when we talk to people that are like only wholesaling. Like you're missing so much potential opportunity in this market. So yeah, definitely hit Erik up if you have any interest in like that type of thing. One thing I want to take us a little bit different direction though, because I'm you're curious to hear myself. Like as you look back, I mean, what's crazy to me is you just described like your like career in business, and it starts like pretty much when I was born. So you got a couple years on me. You got your beard's a little bit more gray than mine,
There's
which
a
means
little
something.
wisdom chalked
So
into that beard.
that's right. That's right. So anyways, that considered, seeing that you've been in the real estate game for a while, I'm curious, like looking back, what are the big things in your opinion you've learned at a few of these different stages that have really helped you to grow your business to the next level?
Oh man, I might need a notepad. So I would say originally one of the early lessons was we call ourselves a real estate investor, and this is assuming someone that's running some level of direct to seller marketing, acquiring, wholesaling, novating, maybe renovating, or fix and flip or financing these properties. The reality is that a real estate investor has to market, acquire, lead manage, disposition, possibly construction, finance, and what am I missing here? Operations, support. So even though I thought I had one job that was to be a real estate investor, early on when I started the business, I was literally wearing 8 different hats. And one of the things I think I learned early on was that rather than trying to be great and accepting average in 8 different departments, the quicker you can get your business in a position where you can start to hire a more qualified person to do that segment of the business, and you only live in the segment of the business that you're really great at and you love, I think I would have made more money. I would have made more friends. I would have had less turnover. I would have probably simplified my life. I would have reduced stress. So, I think a lot of times we say, well, I'll hire that person if, or if I could only get to this stage in my business, I would add that person. A lot of times we do that because we want to conserve the profit that we have, which I understand. And I was in the same boat. However, the majority of the time, that hire is what prevents us from actually ever getting to the next phase because it's impossible to be an A player in 8 different sort of misaligned departments. If you're a great marketer, you probably suck at finance. If you're great at finance, you're likely not good at sales. So whenever we take on too much responsibility inside of our business, we generally accept below average performance in one or more of those departments. And that makes business hard. So I wish I would have maybe made that adjustment a little earlier. And then the second part of that is, okay, I need people. Well, what makes you a great marketer, acquisitions person, lead manager, dispositions person, construction project manager does not make you a good recruiter of talent, retainer of talent, trainer of talent. It's actually sometimes almost a completely different skill set. So you probably hear, and I hear it all the time, where real estate investors say, I want to scale my business. And you ask them why, and it's, you might get 10 different answers: more money, more time off, more impact. And the number one thing I can tell you that's required to scale a business is people. And then I'll ask them, well, what's causing the majority of all of your stress and frustration and bottlenecks in your business? And it's people. So the number one thing that's needed to scale and grow a business is people. And the number one thing most people struggle with at their existing phase of their business is people. And I didn't even see that. I thought I just needed to get better at marketing and acquisitions and sales and all that stuff. I didn't recognize if I stopped doing all of that and I just got really good at developing people and coaching people and teaching people and connecting with people and leading and influencing and nudging and correcting and mentoring people, all of that other stuff would figure itself out. Because if you get good at that, the best marketers will come to work for you. The best salespeople want to come work for you. The best finance people want to come work for you. The best construction people want to come work for you. So as a business owner, I think a lot of times we overlook what it really means to own a business, and we spend too much time running a business. They're two different things.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a few questions like out of curiosity. So I totally understand what you're saying. We're like, having experts in each of the individual things. Like I've seen the same thing in my business, that like oftentimes all that you really need for growth in a business is just to do like the most basic things in every department, and that's what a business needs to flourish. You think you got to
Yep.
do something like crazy innovative, but it's like, it's the simple stuff. Like a lot of businesses, they don't answer their phone. Does it take a genius to
100%.
know you got to answer your phone? No, but like actually doing it, people struggle. Like we struggle
Yeah.
to execute even these basic things. So I agree with you on that. But let's just say we put the lens on of like, I'm just going to give you some constraints, and let's just talk like, how do we deal with the difficulty that this is? So somebody looking at that, okay, what's the long term plan? We have a leader of each of these 8 departments, or whatever this looks like, and we probably have an operator over all those leaders, and we probably have some element of redundancy. So when people leave, and blah blah blah, then we have ways that we can fix those problems, et cetera. Right. So that's kind of what this business looks like scaled. But when you're trying to figure out, like, I have limited budget, limited resources, and I know that I can't necessarily accomplish that right now. Like, help me understand what you're saying. Are you just saying like an early stage business should just be investing as much into people as they possibly can for the purpose of growth? Or like, how would you go through, like, assuming you can't have the cake and eat it too, like how do you prioritize what's most important there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, so this is where the difference between small business and real business is different, right? If you were to start a conventional startup, they raise money and they hire all of those people first. So the
That's
way
true.
corporate starts, which there's a lot that we don't like about that, right? We don't feel like we have a voice. We get lost. They're too big. They can't pivot quick enough. But the one thing they have right is they know how to run businesses, right? So what they would do is
Yeah.
they would raise capital and say, hey, it's going to take us 3 years to be profitable. Here's what we need as far as operating expense and salaries and marketing dollars and all of this stuff. And we need that for 3 years before we become profitable. So there's a lot of merit to that, right? It's probably the correct way to do it. However, the reality is when we're talking about small business entrepreneurs, that's literally the difference between corporate and entrepreneurs. They do that completely differently. And even though it's the right way to do it, it generally just doesn't work for guys like us. That's not where we are. We're grinders, workers, right? We don't fit inside of that corporate box. We like to blaze our own trail. So now that we know that the correct way to do it, right, that's done through corporate, that doesn't necessarily, those same opportunities aren't made available to us. We really have to figure out, I think, what our unique ability is, right? So, like, for me, it's the ability to influence people. For you, it may be the ability to map out a very complex idea and make it simple for your customers to understand and make it simple for your employees to understand, right? Those two skill sets, while they may sound similar, may put us, like they have in this instance, you in a different business and me in a different business. I don't think we give that enough thought. Sometimes people just gravitate towards something they think they can make money on without really understanding whether or not their skill set aligns. So let's use an example of real estate wholesale. If you boil that down to its most basic concept, it's marketing first, sales second. So if you're a good marketer, which means you understand how to connect words and messages to a potential customer's needs, right? That's all marketing is. Here's what we can do. And if you put that in front of the right group of people, they're going to call you, right? And then once they call you, you have to sell them your product or service. Everything else is secondary, tertiary in importance to generating a lead and monetizing it. So if you're good at marketing and sales, real estate wholesale would be a good business for you. So you do that for a period of time to where you've created enough income. Now you start to look at, okay, inside of these things that I do, what am I incompetent at and not enjoy? And that becomes your first hire. So a lot of times in real estate wholesale, so hiring an executive assistant would be my first hire. things like scheduling, replying to emails, booking travel, like a lot of non-income producing activities that most entrepreneurs get drawn into because they're a one man or one woman show. Hiring an executive assistant for $25 an hour, 40K a year. If we're running a business that nets us $150,000 a year, I think the first limiting belief is if I'm making 150 and I hire someone for 50, I now only keep 100. Follow me? I think the
Yeah.
reality is I make 150, I pay this person 50, now I make 250. Does that make sense? Because now I'm working in more of the income producing activities. So there needs to be with an entrepreneur strategic hire, and it should always be moving the lowest income, lowest impact, lowest energy task off of your plate and moving it onto someone else's. And that allows you to function in this concept only in things that either generate a lead or convert a lead. So as a wholesaler, you hire an EA. Everything else that you're doing that doesn't involve talking to a customer and writing a contract, you've now delegated that, and you're talking to twice as many people, writing twice as many contracts.
Got it. So it's almost like what you described before is like the end state, but you're saying the process to getting there is looking at what sucks your energy away and what takes your time, and then delegating those one piece at a time. So probably at the beginning you do start out like day one, you lead 8 departments, and then you're just slowly getting rid of a few of those things as you go along.
Yeah, and when we start, that's exciting. It's exhilarating, right? Because it's new and it's fresh and it's us breaking the mold of what everybody told us we had to do. But at some point, the excitement wears off. The honeymoon phase is off. It's like, hey, doing that stuff is no longer cool because I've started my own business. We got to start being smarter about how we spend our time, and we have to. And one of the big, I think, values of small business in our country is to create opportunity for more people. So if we just operate in this little shell and we're a 1 or 2 person operation and we never create a big enough organization to bring other people into that with us, to me, that would be a shame. But that's just the way when I look at business, it's at least twofold, right? It's the ability to be able to help more customers, and maybe of equal or greater value to me is the ability to help more employees, like give people a place to work where, generally in corporate, most people would tell you corporate sucks to work at, most people, right? I think we have a unique opportunity inside of small business to create a more meaningful experience for people inside of our businesses, and to not grow and expand to open up that opportunity to more people, to me, would be a shame. But that's just me. That might not be for everybody. And then the money comes with it, right? If I help more customers and I make working for me a more enjoyable, rewarding place to be, in my experience, you end up making more money.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Let's talk about like attracting and retaining great people. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your strategies there. I've always kind of thought of it as like the number one trump card in business, because you can learn to market, or you can learn to sell, or you can learn to do operations, or you can learn finance. But if you could just learn to attract good people, then you have the ability to acquire the greatest of any skill that could exist in the marketplace, right? So that's obviously like the most scalable long-term solution there. And it seems to be something that like a lot of people don't agree on what good people is. I know my definition of a good employee has changed a lot over the years that I've been in business.
Yeah.
And what I thought was the right person at one point is really different from what I could think is the right person now. And also, finding those people can be really hard. Sometimes it's easy. I'm just curious to hear, like, in your opinion, the right way to go about that, what's been successful for you, and what have you found is like the key to attracting and keeping those people.
So the short version is the best way to find great people is to become a great person. Let me say that again. The best way to find great people is to become a great person. So what does that mean? Each person may see it differently, but for me, I think there's 5 to 7 characteristics. Or if you ever read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? So how do they take care of their body? How do they take care of their friends? How do they take care of their family? How do they take care of their spirit? Right? How do they take care of their finances? Right? And what I think, to your point, like what I would have thought a good employee was 15 years ago, is someone that would take instruction. If they just did what I told them to do. Now today, that's almost opposite. I want someone to challenge whatever anybody tells them to do, to potentially find a new or better or more efficient or more cost efficient way. So that's almost 100% opposite, right? I don't want people to do, I want them to think. So now what you start thinking about is, well, let me go back. The number one way that I hire talent is through social media. And the way that I attract talent through social media is I'm just myself. I talk about what I'm going through as a father, what I'm going through as a business person. I read an awful lot every day and every week. And then I sort of take that information that I read, I apply it to my own experiences, my own circumstances, and then I share my perspective. And that attracts people. Who does it attract? It attracts people that are into sales. It attracts people that are into being an entrepreneur. It attracts people that are into becoming a better father and a better husband and a better leader. And my experience has been a well-documented personal and professional journey on social media that's authentic and organic has attracted A players to my organization. That's been my own personal experience. And then I think what you have to document is what your version of an A player is. And in our organization, we look for what we call an ideal team player. That's from a book written by Patrick Lencioni. And the three aspects of an ideal team player are they're humble, hungry, and they're smart. And by smart, he means EQ, not IQ, right? So they have the ability to be able to handle conflict, maintain meaningful and respectful communication, even when there's maybe a lot of pressure or there's tension or disagreement that arises, right? And then we look at a core value fit. So we have a set of core values that are non-negotiable for us. That is perspective, it's having a can-do attitude, integrity, doing the right thing, excellence, which means improving and getting better every day, respect, that's kind of our EQ core value. That means to treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way I want to be treated, the way you want to be treated. So I have to have an awareness about me of what other people want and what their desires are, and then humility and discipline. So we run them through a series of questions and interviews that verify that those core values are something that they align with. And then, of course, we look at their ability to be able to do the work. Like, do they have the skill set and the cognitive thinking ability to be able to do the job that we're interviewing for? And then there's some what I would call soft skills. I mean, I'm in the process of we're going through what we call like a forced ranking, top grading process in our organization right now. And we just did it last quarter where we ranked everybody. Before I got there, it was A, B, C, D, E, F. And when I got to the quarterly, there was like all these people batched into like this B category. The problem with that is it doesn't make you make a decision. It doesn't nothing happens with that. Like most people, if we said they were a B player, we probably leave them alone. So I said, hey, we're going to redo this, but we're not going to, there is no B category. There's only A, C, and F. And anybody that's in the C category, we're going to put together a 90-day plan to improve their skills or improve their core value fit or improve their cognitive ability or improve whatever that's keeping them from being an A player. And if at the end of the 90 days, if they're not able to move in an A player, they'll probably leave on their own because they're not going to like us pushing them that direction. And if they're still here at the end of 90 days, we need to look at our management team and leadership team because you've been ineffective as a leader. You've allowed your people to hover in mediocrity for 90 days, and you haven't been able to train them and lead them to be an A player. All right? So like when you start thinking about that, and even if you're listening to this, that's like, man, that's awesome. That's cool. I can't wait to do that. But let me boil it down to the tough part. There will be C players in your organization that do an okay job that you really like that you're going to be faced with letting go. C players will kill the productivity of an organization. And the worst part is they'll run off the A players. A players hate C players. Right? So eventually over time, if you hold on to C players, you'll lose your A players. Those are some things that come with talent acquisition and recruiting. I've had a great, I would say, great deal of success from social media. And then you need to have like a disciplined interview process to verify the alignment of the people that you're interviewing with your culture and also the role that they're applying for.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. So when you did that, so you said either they're going to leave, the C players, they're going to leave within 90 days, or you look hard at the leader at the end of the 90 days. I imagine you had to replace a few people at the end of that exercise.
Yeah, I mean, we this was just so we're 2 days into it. So at the beginning, but I don't think it'll take long. As a matter of fact, I had a leadership meeting today, and I said, "Hey, you need to forecast that 25% of these people will leave. So let's not wait until they actually leave to start replacing them. We should have efforts to start bringing in qualified candidates to potentially hire in those departments now. Because one of the other things that'll keep you from placing a C player is out of necessity. Because if you only have maybe one person in that department or three people in that department, and if you lost those one or two people, you might not be able to answer the phones. You might not be able to attend appointments. You might not be able to pay your bills. You might not. So we need to be proactive about recruiting to make sure that we have you got to build a bench so that you're not bullied into keeping a C player out of necessity.
That's exactly what's screwed me over time and time again. Like there's people sometimes that you got to let go, but you can't until you find a replacement and you
Yeah, and
don't
the tough
build
part
that
is if
in.
you let them go, you would finally be forced to find a replacement. It's like, sometimes we have those things in the wrong. It's like, I can't fire them because I haven't found anybody yet. And I'll go, you haven't found anybody yet because you haven't fired them.
Well, I had that happen to me where there was somebody that we needed to let go and we kept on looking for a replacement and we kept on looking and it just didn't happen. It just wasn't happening. We couldn't find the right person. We have some roles that are pretty difficult to recruit for. And then they quit. And then somehow we made it work and we were better off. And it
Yeah,
was like really hard. It was really stressful for just a little bit. And then like 3 days after they were gone, we're like, okay, we're officially better off than we
yeah.
were when they were here.
And you'll find that I think a
It's
lot of
happened.
times with C players, I mean, if they truly are a C player, we probably attach a greater value to the value of the work or their presence. It's really hard to measure, like I said, like how big of a negative impact C players have on A players. It doesn't show up like on a scorecard or a P&L anywhere. It's like a
It's
hidden,
intangible.
yeah. So I mean, I get it. It's tough. I've been there. I probably still struggle with a little bit today. I mean, I got 30 C players in my organization right now. Who the heck let that happen, right? Me. So, but we're actively working on it and, coaching, devising improvement plans for each and every person, telling them basically they're a C player and then letting them know the gap between C and what A player would look like for their position and giving them the feedback to let them know that, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm going to give you all the resources you need. I'm here to encourage you along the way. And if you opt out, that's all right. And improvement's the only option. It's not like this is a suggestion, it's a requirement. So those are tough conversations that have most people shy away from them.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Can you think of anything you could have done? I mean, you said it's it's you, right? I mean, that's the reason you have 30 C players in the company and you're taking action to correct that now. But is there a certain thing that you believe if you had been doing this particular thing consistently over the last year, you wouldn't be in that position?
Yeah, I think very, very clear standards, like zero, like ambiguity or like gray, right? 100% commitment from each of the team members to those standards, and then unwavering, consistent accountability to those. It's like we have a tendency to say, well, this happened the other in the meeting that half the crew said the guy was an A player and half the team said he was a C. Everybody agreed he was B, right? But that's the beauty of eliminating that, where it's like, because C's like, ooh, B's like, oh yeah, I'd love to have a B player, right? But a lot of times I think we
I,
miscategorize B players because we're too nice to call them what they are, which is C. And he goes, well, and he literally, so they had this guy ranked as A, and he did $800,000 less in production than another A player. And I said, how does that happen? You can't like, does that mean the other guy's like an A plus 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 plus? No, he
Yeah.
met and
The
exceeded goal.
generous perspective.
He met and exceeded goal by like 100 grand. And we're like, well, yeah, but that's because this other guy doesn't work weekends. And I'm like, well, so in that position, can you be an A player and never work weekends? And the reality is, maybe the answer is yes, maybe it's no, but we hadn't clearly communicated the standard. So does that mean there was gray, right? Like, so, and that I think is a lot of times we don't have clearly documented, communicated standards, which then means we're reluctant to hold someone accountable to a loose standard. And then there ends up being this gray area of mediocrity that people can sort of flop around in. I would have went back and just had, again, another thing corporate does really well. It's like, it's non-negotiable. You got to be here at 8:55. You can't clock out till 5:01, right? And if you do it, you're gone. I would have had more emphasis on clearly communicated standards and a cadence of accountability that consistently reinforced those expectations and quickly moved people out. Because generally, most people want to win, they want to do a good job. The top two reasons why they don't perform is lack of clear expectations and lack of training. So if I'm meeting with you daily and saying, hey, why'd you miss your number? It would be very clear to me if you either didn't understand the expectations or you needed additional training, and I would have the opportunity to train you and restate expectations daily. But what most people did and what I did is I hired people, I trained them for a week, I cut them loose, I had a loose set of standards, I let them off the hook on those standards because I only trained them a week and I knew that wasn't enough. But then when does that stop? Like when do I no longer forgive a lack of performance because I've been a shitty leader and manager and coach? I don't know.
Yeah. I
Um,
don't know the answer to your question, but I've been in the same boat for
yeah, so
sure.
that's one thing I would have done is to just be better at clearly communicating and posting and making everybody aware of the standards, and then having a unapologetic cadence of accountability and check-ins on those commitments and standards.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I wish I wish it was as easy to do as it is to say.
Well, yeah. So
It
like,
is
and I
so
tell you what,
hard.
it's easy for me to say because I'm a maverick style visionary, nurturer, lover of people. That's why you have to get like in my organization, the most important person for me is that accountability officer. So that COO, that integrator, that director of ops. I'm great at inspiring and motivating and loving on people, and I shy away from accountability because I'm such a relationship builder, and it feels sometimes accountability is the opposite of relationship, even though it's not really. Like, really, accountability helps grow relationships because I know I can trust you to call me out. You know that you can trust me to call you out. That actually builds more trust. But in the moment, it feels a little confrontational. It feels icky. It feels micromanager. So for me, it's really important for me to have someone that drives something that's objective and holds people accountable to numbers and metrics and data and not feelings. I'm very much subjective and feelings based.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And again, I wish I had the answers to all those things. It's hard to keep standards really high in a company. And you know where I personally had the biggest struggle with that is as soon as you move from like because obviously at some point it's just like you and you hold yourself accountable the way you're supposed to do and everybody's happy because it's just you, right? That's easy.
Yeah.
And then you get like this small team where like you manage everybody on the team,
Yep.
and I feel like that's pretty easy too,
Yep.
because it's hard for core values to not exist throughout the company because you're doing the hiring. It's hard for people for you not be setting that culture because people interact directly with you. Where it gets really hard is when you start to add in like middle management,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's this yeah, so then there's this distance, right? So it's not just like it's not just your ability to execute on those things, but your ability to find the right people who can execute on those things or train and inspire those leaders to be that good. And it's that's that for me, that's where things got like really really hard to like actually fulfill on exactly what you're talking about doing here.
Yeah,
And I don't know what like count that is, but it's tricky.
That's the part where you go, like Jim Collins wrote a book and he talks about like the 5 levels of leadership. And number one is like a high producing individual. That's where you do everything. Number
Mm-hmm.
two is a competent man, or I'm sorry, an effective team member. That's where you're working on a group of people. There's like you and 5 others, right? Then three is a competent manager. That's where it gets difficult because it's not you doing stuff anymore. It's you delegating how and when and where and who to do something and hopefully setting reasonable expectations of when it should all be done, which has nothing to do with
Yeah.
actually doing the work, by the way. So that jump to competent manager feels difficult. And then we move to executive leader, which is we're not actually managing any tasks or anything. We're just literally developing competent managers to lead other people. And that's where it all just gets like hard, like really, really difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's each one of those phases. 1 and 2 are very much similar. 3, when you have to manage people to do the task and train them, and that's where it gets difficult.
Yeah, no, it's a super super fair case, and I think I kind of learned that, but I didn't learn the step beyond that, and it bit me in the butt a few times.
Yeah.
is, is like that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like every one of those steps, like I had to learn it. Like I screwed it up before I learned it, but that's just the one that I'm currently still figuring out. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's
Good for you for
it's
figuring
tricky.
it out, though.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all have to figure it out someday. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question because I know your time's valuable. Thank you for everything you've shared.
Of course.
The last question I have for you, like, I know you consult with a lot of people, just business owners that you know, people involved with your programs, et cetera. I know a lot of people look up to you and from like a coaching capacity. That said, so the questions I've asked you so far are mostly about you and yourself and what you learned. But when you look at your conversations that you have with other people, and if you were to identify like one thing that is probably, in your opinion, the most common thread that other people just haven't figured out, that if they could figure this out, they would be able to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. Do you have any idea what that would be?
What is the one thing that most people have been unable to figure out that if they were able to figure out would mean the world or would make the biggest difference?
Yeah. Yeah, you get what I'm saying. Like the advice that you find yourself giving other people most often.
I
I guess
would
is
batch
another
it.
way to
I
ask.
would batch it into leadership. It's a very broad category. There's different brands of leadership, but the ability to be able to authentically connect with people, ethically influence them in the direction that leads towards a common goal, and then allow them to celebrate and have the credit for the victory, and us to take full responsibility for any failures. That, like, the ability to be able to figure out that little 15-second segment of what I just gave would literally solve everything. But there's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into that, right? Like our past experiences, previous business partnerships. We've been burned by employees before. We're not happy at home. That we don't realize a lot of times, like our inability to manage our family and our friendship and our personal finances and our love life, how that carries over and makes us sometimes a bad leader at work. But literally, those things to me, if most people could just figure out those 3 to 4 things, everything in their business from marketing, sales, and all that other stuff would get better immediately.
Yeah. So if I hear what you're telling me correctly, you're basically saying a lot of people would come to you with like what they feel is a marketing problem or a sales problem or whatever, when the
Yeah.
reality is, in your opinion, that's a leadership problem. And if
Yes.
you could just figure out how to be a great leader, then those other problems go away.
Yeah.
Or at
Nearly
least
every
they
department,
solve
whether
themselves.
it's marketing, sales, finance, construction, is always a people problem. And it's their inability to lead people and manage people, their inability to be able to hire people. Almost everything comes back to a people problem.
Yeah, that's a super fair point. Well, thank you, Eric, for abundantly sharing all of your wisdom here.
Absolutely.
I've been super grateful to
Thanks for
learn this
having
from
me.
you. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, maybe they're interested in the Novations course, or want to connect with you for a different reason, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to find me is on Instagram. It's Erik_Brewer_invest.
All right. Perfect. Thanks a ton, Eric, for the time that you shared with us today. And for everybody listening, I'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.